The eviction notice felt cold in my hand, but not as cold as the look on my old boss's face. He didn't know the paper I was holding was for him. He didn't know that the world had flipped upside down in just one day. 24 hours ago, he had fired me, calling me incompetent. He had smirked as he told me to pack my things. Today, I stood across the street from his big, shiny office building, but I wasn't looking at my old office. I was looking at the entire building. My building. And he was about to become my first problem to solve. My name is Erna Wells, and I am 45 years old. For 20 long years, I gave my soul to Sterling Corporation. I wasn't just a senior analyst. I was the office memory. I knew who liked their coffee black and who was allergic to peanuts. I stayed late, came in early, and cancelled my own vacations to meet impossible deadlines. I thought my loyalty meant something. I thought I was part of a family. I treated that company like it was my own home, nurturing it and caring for its every need. I was so wrong. It was a house that was never truly mine. Yesterday started like any other Tuesday. I was preparing a major presentation, the one I had worked on for 3 months straight. My boss, Mr. Alastair Finch, a man who wore expensive suits that couldn't hide his cheap soul, called me into his glass office. I walked in with a smile, expecting praise for the project. Instead, he looked at me with cold, empty eyes. "Erna," he said, not even bothering to look up from his computer, "your services are no longer required." The words didn't make sense. It was like he was speaking a different language. I asked him why. I deserved a reason after 20 years. He finally looked at me, a cruel little smile playing on his lips. "To be blunt, you're incompetent," he said. "The company is moving in a new, dynamic direction, and you simply can't keep up." He pointed to a young woman outside his office, someone half my age. "Brielle is taking over. She's sharper, faster." In that single moment, my 2 decades of dedication, my sacrifice, my entire professional life, was reduced to a single ugly word. Incompetent. It echoed in my head as security walked me out like a criminal. The walk home was a blur of shame and tears. How could this happen? I gave them everything. I missed my son's school plays. I worked through anniversaries. My husband, before he passed away, used to joke that I was married to my job. Now, that job had divorced me without a second thought. I sat in my empty house, the termination letter shaking in my hands. The walls felt like they were closing in. I felt worthless, old, and completely and utterly alone. What was I going to do? My pension was years away, and my savings wouldn't last forever. Just as I hit my lowest point, the mailman knocked. Among the junk mail and bills was a thick, fancy envelope from a law firm. I almost threw it away, thinking it was just another problem I couldn't handle. But something made me open it. The letter was about my grandfather, a quiet man who had passed away a few months ago. I barely knew him. He was a simple handyman who lived in a small apartment across the country. My mother said he was a private man who never had much. The letter said he had left me something in his will. I read the legal words, my mind still foggy with grief and anger. It said he had bequeathed to me his sole significant asset. I expected it to be a few $1,000s, maybe his old tools. I kept reading, my eyes scanning the page for a number. But it wasn't a number. It was an address. An address in downtown Chicago. An address I knew all too well. It was the address of a massive, 30-story commercial skyscraper. The very same building where I had been fired just hours before. My grandfather, the quiet handyman, had owned the entire thing. My mind couldn't process it. It felt like a dream, a cruel joke. I found the old deed tucked inside the envelope. There it was in black and white. Owner, Elias Wells. My grandfather. I stumbled to the window and looked out at the city skyline. There it was, the Sterling Corporation building, my building, standing tall against the grey sky. Mr. Finch, in his fancy office on the 28th floor, was a tenant. My tenant. A fire I never knew I possessed began to burn in my chest, melting away the tears and the fear. The word he used came back to me. Incompetent. The next morning, I didn't put on my old work clothes. I put on my best dress, the one I saved for special occasions. I walked out of my house not as a victim, but as a woman with a purpose. I wasn't going to the Sterling Corporation building to beg for my job back. I was going there to remind my former boss that sometimes, the people you throw away are the very ones who hold all the power. He thought he had broken me, but he had just unlocked a side of me that had been asleep for 20 years. I walked right past the security desk, no longer needing a visitor's pass. I took the elevator straight to the 28th floor. When the doors opened, the entire office stared. Brielle, the new girl, looked up with a confused expression. But I only had eyes for one door. Mr. Finch's door. I didn't knock. I walked straight in, and he looked up from his desk, his face turning from shock to pure rage. "What are you doing here, Erna?" "I told you." I held up my hand, and for the first time, he was silent. I placed the cold, crisp eviction notice on his expensive desk. "Mr. Finch," I said, my voice as steady as steel, "you have 30 days to vacate my property." What do you think will happen next? Mr. Finch's whole world is about to be turned upside down. If you want to see how this unfolds, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss Chapter 2. And let me know in the comments where you are watching this story from. Mr. Finch stared at the paper on his desk, then back at me. A strange, barking laugh escaped his lips. "Is this a joke, Erna? Did your little support group put you up to this? Fired employees trying to get back at the boss? It's pathetic." He pushed the notice back towards me with 2 fingers, as if it were a piece of garbage. "Get out of here before I call security and have you removed for trespassing." Again. His voice was full of the same arrogance he'd shown me for 20 years. He still saw me as small. He had no idea. I didn't pick up the paper. I simply looked at him, my face calm, and slid another set of documents across the polished wood of his desk. It was the deed to the building and the letter from my grandfather's lawyer. "My grandfather was Elias Wells," I said softly. "And as of yesterday, this building, this desk, and the chair you're sitting in are all mine." I watched his face as he read. The smirk slowly melted away, like wax dripping from a candle. His eyes widened, scanning the pages again and again, searching for a trick. The color drained from his cheeks. He finally understood. For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of the air conditioner and the frantic beating of my own heart. I remembered a time, 5 years ago, when I presented a project that I had poured my entire heart into. I had stayed up all night for weeks. In the big meeting, Mr. Finch presented it as his own idea. When a board member asked me a question about the data, he cut me off. "Don't worry," he'd said with a chuckle. "Erna just handles the paperwork. I do the real thinking." He had stolen my voice then. Now, standing in my building, I was finally finding it again. "This is impossible," he finally stammered, his voice a weak whisper. He looked around his office as if seeing it for the first time. He wasn't looking at his empire anymore. He was a guest in my house. He stood up, his false confidence returning like a mask. "You have no idea what you're doing, Erna. This building, it's not a toy. There are problems here, things a woman like you couldn't possibly handle. Your grandfather knew that. What did he mean by that? What secrets did these walls hold that he thought would scare me away?" I gave him a small, cold smile. The kind of smile he had given me when he fired me. "You called me incompetent, Mr. Finch. Maybe I am. But I'm a fast learner. And my first lesson is in property management." I turned to leave his office, feeling the shocked stares of my former co-workers on my back. They were frozen, watching a drama they couldn't possibly understand. I didn't look at them. I walked straight to the elevator, my head held high. The doors closed, and for the first time in a day, I let myself breathe. It was a breath of freedom. Down in the lobby, I found the building manager's office. An older man named George, with kind eyes and work-worn hands, looked up from his desk. He recognized me. "Erna, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." I told him I wasn't an employee anymore. I was the new owner. George's eyes went wide, but then he smiled. "Your grandfather," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "Elias was a good man. Very quiet, but he saw everything that happened in this building. Everything." A shiver went down my spine. What did my grandfather see? I spent the rest of the day with George, who walked me through the building's basics. He showed me the heating systems, the security cameras, and the master keys. He handed me a large, heavy ring of keys. They felt like a weapon in my hand. Holding them, I thought about my late husband. I remembered how stressed I was when he got sick, begging Mr. Finch for a promotion that would have come with better health insurance. Mr. Finch had denied it, saying I wasn't ready for more responsibility. That promotion went to his own nephew a week later. My husband passed away 6 months after that. This wasn't just about a job anymore. That evening, I sat in my quiet house, the building's blueprints spread across my dining table. It felt like I was learning the secrets of a giant beast. There were hidden hallways, old dumbwaiters, and entire floors that were no longer in use. My grandfather wasn't just a landlord. He was the keeper of 100 stories hidden in the concrete and steel. Who was this man I barely knew? Why did he keep this massive part of his life a secret from his own family? It felt like he had left me not just a building, but a puzzle. Just as I started to feel a sense of control, my phone rang. It was the lawyer who had handled the will. "Mrs. Wells," he said, his voice serious. "There's a complication with the Sterling Corporation lease." My heart sank. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. What kind of complication? I asked, my voice tight. The lawyer sighed. "It seems Mr. Finch has a special clause in his company's lease. An agreement he made directly with your grandfather years ago. It gives him certain rights." Rights? What rights could a tenant possibly have over the owner? I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. What kind of rights? I demanded. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear the rustling of papers. The lawyer's next words made the blood in my veins run cold. "According to this document," the lawyer said slowly, "if the ownership of the building changes hands to a family member, Mr. Finch has the legal right to challenge the transfer. He can make a counteroffer to buy the entire building himself, and by the terms of the agreement, his offer must be accepted." The lawyer's words hit me like a physical blow. His offer must be accepted. My victory, which had felt so real just a few minutes ago, turned to dust in my hands. The power I felt vanished, replaced by a familiar, crushing weight. Mr. Finch could buy the entire building from me, and I would be forced to sell. He had won. He would take my grandfather's legacy, my one chance at a new life, and turn it into another one of his victories. I was right back where I started, powerless, with him holding all the cards. I hung up the phone, my body trembling. All I could think was that Mr. Finch was right. I was incompetent. I had walked into his office so proudly, only to find out he had a secret weapon all along. How could my grandfather do this? Why would he sign an agreement that gave his enemy such power over his own family? I looked at the old, kind photo of him on my mantelpiece. It didn't make sense. The quiet, simple man I remembered would never have made a deal with a shark like Alistair Finch. Unless he had no other choice. The next morning, Mr. Finch was waiting for me in the lobby of my building. He wasn't angry anymore. He was smiling, a wide, predatory grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Erna," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "My lawyers informed me you're aware of our little arrangement." He gestured for me to join him at the small cafe in the lobby. "Let's be reasonable. I'm prepared to offer you a generous sum for your troubles. Enough for you to retire comfortably. Take the money. You don't want the headache of running a place like this." I stared at him, my coffee growing cold. He was talking to me like I was a child who had found a shiny toy that belonged to a grown-up. He thought I would just roll over and give up. And a part of me, the tired and broken part, wanted to. But then I looked around the lobby. I saw George the manager polishing the brass railings. I saw the tenants coming and going, living their lives. This place wasn't just a pile of bricks and glass. It was a community. It was my grandfather's life's work. And it was mine. I'm not selling, I said, my voice barely a whisper but full of a strength I didn't know I had. His smile tightened. Don't be a fool, Erna. This isn't a negotiation. It's a formality. The contract your grandfather signed is ironclad. You will sell. The only question is whether you do it the easy way or the hard way. He stood up, towering over me. I'll have my official offer on your lawyer's desk by tomorrow. You're out of your league. What did he have on my grandfather that would force him to sign such a thing? After he left, I found George down in the boiler room. I asked him about my grandfather and Mr. Finch. George's face grew serious. Your grandfather never trusted Finch, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. But Finch's father and your grandfather, they started out together a long time ago. They were partners. Partners? My mind reeled. This wasn't just a random business deal. This was personal, stretching back decades. George told me my grandfather had an old storage room in the sub-basement. He kept everything from the old days down there, he said. Maybe you'll find some answers. George led me down a dark, dusty corridor I never knew existed, to a heavy steel door. He unlocked it, and the air that hit me was cold and smelled of old paper and forgotten time. The room was filled with wooden filing cabinets and dusty boxes. It was a tomb of my grandfather's secrets. For hours, I sorted through old files, faded photographs, and yellowed newspapers. I found a picture from the 1970s. It showed two young men, arms around each other, standing proudly in front of the half-finished building. One was my grandfather. The other was a young man with a familiar, arrogant smile. It was Mr. Finch's father. They had built this place together. So what happened? Why did my grandfather end up as the sole owner, and why was there a secret deal with his old partner's son? I kept digging, my hands covered in dust. In the bottom of a heavy box, underneath old tax records, I found it. It was a small, leather-bound journal. My grandfather's journal. His handwriting was neat and clear. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. I found an entry from 10 years ago, around the time the lease agreement was signed. The entry was short and cryptic. It read, Alistair Finch forced my hand today. He knows about the foundation. He used it against me to get the clause in the lease. But he's a fool if he thinks I didn't build in a failsafe. He signed his own trap. A failsafe? What was he talking about? What was wrong with the building's foundation? My grandfather hadn't been a victim. He had set a trap. He knew this day would come, and he had left me a way out. A way to fight back. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer again. His voice was grim. Erna, it's here. Finch's official offer. It's low, insulting even, but it's legal. The clock starts now. You have 48 hours to either accept his offer, or legally prove the clause is invalid. 48 hours. My eyes scanned the journal page again. My grandfather wrote one more sentence. The proof of his deceit is in the heart of the beast. The original partnership agreement, the one his father hid, is in the west wall of the 28th floor corner office. My blood ran cold. The 28th floor corner office was Mr. Finch's office. 48 hours. The words echoed in the dusty silence of the storage room. 2 days to unravel a mystery that had been buried for decades, or I would lose everything. My mind raced, trying to form a plan. How could I possibly get into Mr. Finch's office, the very heart of his kingdom, and find a secret hidden in a wall? It was impossible. A wave of despair washed over me. He had me trapped. My grandfather had left me a puzzle with no solution, a key to a door I could never reach. This was a game for powerful people, and I was just a fired employee. I closed the journal and walked back through the building's quiet basement hallways, the weight of the 48-hour deadline pressing down on my shoulders. I found George in his small office, carefully logging the day's maintenance reports. I placed my grandfather's journal on his desk, open to the page with the final entry. I watched his face as he read it, his brow furrowed in concentration. He read it once, then twice. When he finally looked up, there was a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He slowly nodded, a grim but determined look on his face. "The foundation," George whispered, more to himself than to me. "I always wondered." He tapped the journal. "Your grandfather was a builder, Erna. The best there ever was. But he was an honest man. Finch's father. He was the one who cut corners to save money. If there's a problem with this building's foundation, a secret big enough to blackmail your grandfather, then we have to find that proof." He looked at me, his decision made. "He was my friend. I'll help you. Finch may own the company, but for tonight, we own the building." Our plan was simple, but dangerous. That night, long after the last employee had gone home, the building would have a sudden electrical emergency. George knew the systems inside and out. He could create a small, harmless blackout on the lower floors that would send the single night guard running down to the main breaker room in the basement. This would give me a 10-minute window. 10 minutes to get to the 28th floor, find the hidden compartment, and get out without being seen on any security cameras, which would also be temporarily offline. As we waited for midnight, my mind drifted back to a cold winter's day 2 years ago. My husband was sick, and I was struggling to pay for his medicine. I saw an article in a business magazine about Mr. Finch. There was a picture of him on his brand new yacht, a boat he named the Predator. He was laughing, holding a glass of champagne. I remember looking at that picture and then at the pile of medical bills on my table, and feeling a kind of cold, quiet rage. This fight wasn't just about me anymore. It was for everyone he had ever stepped on to get to the top. At exactly 2 a.m., the lights in George's office flickered and died. It was time. "Go now," he whispered into a walkie-talkie. "You have 10 minutes, not a second more." My heart hammered against my ribs as I ran up the dark emergency stairwell. The building was eerily silent. Every little sound echoed in the darkness. I finally reached the 28th floor and pushed the heavy door open. The Sterling Corporation office was a landscape of shadows, the desks and chairs like sleeping animals. It felt strange and wrong to be there, a ghost in the place that had caused me so much pain. I crept into Mr. Finch's office, using the light from my phone to see. The room was just as I remembered it, big, cold, and empty feeling. I ran my hands along the west wall, just as my grandfather's journal had instructed. It was covered in expensive wood paneling. It looked perfect, seamless. How could there be a compartment here? My grandfather was a handyman, I reminded myself. He thought with his hands. He would have made the hiding spot clever, but simple. I started tapping on the panels, listening for a hollow sound. Nothing. My time was running out. I scanned the wall again, my eyes desperate. Then I saw it. A single ornate bookshelf filled with ridiculously expensive-looking books that I knew for a fact Mr. Finch had never read. My grandfather's note said, "In the wall." What if it was behind the shelf? I pushed against it. It was heavy, bolted to the wall. This was it. I put all my weight into it, grunting with the effort. Slowly, painfully, the bookshelf moved, scraping against the floor. It wasn't bolted in. It was on a hidden hinge. Behind it was not a safe, but a small, almost invisible seam in the wall panel. I pressed the panel, and it clicked open, revealing a small, dark space inside the wall. My fingers trembled as I reached inside. They brushed against a thick, leather-bound folder. I pulled it out. This was it. The original partnership agreement. I had it in my hands. I felt a surge of victory, a feeling so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. My grandfather hadn't let me down. He had left me the perfect weapon. But why would Finch be so careless as to not find this himself? Suddenly, a crackle came from the walkie-talkie on my belt. It was George's panicked voice. "Erna, get out of there now. The elevator. Someone is coming up. It's Finch." My blood turned to ice. Finch. What was he doing here at 2 in the morning? I shoved the folder into my jacket and tried to push the heavy bookshelf back into place, but it wouldn't budge. Just as I heard the ding of the elevator arriving on the 28th floor, the handle on Mr. Finch's office door began to turn. The click of the lock turning felt as loud as a gunshot in the silent office. The door swung open, and the dark shape of a man filled the frame. Alastair Finch. He flicked on the lights, and his eyes, cold and sharp, immediately found me. They darted from my terrified face to the heavy bookshelf pulled away from the wall, then to the small, dark hole of the open compartment. He didn't look surprised. He looked angry, but it was the calm, chilling anger of a predator whose prey had done something unexpected. He knew. He knew the compartment was there. My first instinct was to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the expensive carpet. My hand tightened around the leather folder in my jacket. This was it. This folder was my only shield. Mr. Finch took a slow step into the room, his eyes never leaving mine. "I should have known," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Elias was always sentimental, leaving little clues behind like a character in a children's book. "Did you really think I wouldn't be watching you? The moment you started asking George about the old days, I knew you'd end up here." He had been one step ahead of me the entire time. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't a lucky guess. He had been waiting for me to make my move. "That little power failure," he continued, walking closer, "was a nice try, but it triggered a silent alert on my phone. An alert designed for one purpose, to let me know if anyone ever got into this office after hours." He was circling me now, like a shark. "Your grandfather put that document there to protect you. But all he really did was lead you right into my trap." What did he mean? I clutched the folder tighter. "What was the deal?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What did you do to him?" Mr. Finch let out a humorless laugh. "My father and your grandfather built this place on a handshake. But my father was a businessman. He saved millions by using a cheaper concrete mixture for the deep foundation piles. Your grandfather, the honest builder, found out too late. He was horrified. He wanted to expose him, but my father convinced him it would cause a panic and ruin them both. They buried the secret, right under our feet. So that was it. The building itself was built on a lie. A dark secret that had given the Finch family power over my grandfather for 50 years. He signed that clause in the lease to keep you quiet, didn't he?" I said. "He threatened to expose the weak foundation and destroy your grandfather's reputation." Mr. Finch smiled. "Exactly. And now that secret is yours. So you have a choice. You can give me that folder, take my generous offer, and walk away. Or you can use it, and I will personally see to it that this building is condemned. Everyone will lose everything." This was the curse he was talking about. If I exposed his family's fraud, I would be destroying my own inheritance. The building would become worthless, a ticking time bomb. All the tenants would be forced out. George would lose his job. I would be left with nothing but a pile of rubble and lawsuits. He had presented me with an impossible choice. He was giving me a gun and telling me to either hand it over, or use it on myself. My mind went blank. He was right. I was in over my head. Just as he took another step toward me, reaching for the folder, the office door creaked open again. George stood there, holding a heavy wrench, his face pale but his eyes steady. "Leave her alone, Alastair," he said, his voice firm. Mr. Finch barely glanced at him. "Stay out of this, old man, or you'll be the first one I fire when this is all over." But George's presence was enough. It broke the spell. It reminded me I wasn't alone. I remembered another line from my grandfather's journal, one I had skimmed over. A truth can be a weapon or a shield, depending on how you hold it. My grandfather didn't leave me a weapon to destroy myself. He left me a shield. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but a new, cold resolve settled in its place. I looked Mr. Finch directly in the eye. "You think you've given me an impossible choice," I said, my voice clear and strong. "But you're wrong. You think this folder is about destroying the building. But it's not. It's about destroying you." I wasn't going to play his game anymore. I was going to write my own rules. Before he could react, I turned and ran. I didn't head for the elevators. I ran for the emergency stairs, pushing past a stunned George. "The stairs, Erna. Go!" he yelled. I could hear Mr. Finch shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I flew down the concrete stairs, my footsteps echoing in the stairwell, clutching the folder to my chest like it was my own heart. I burst out of a side door and into the cool pre-dawn air of the city, gasping for breath. I had escaped. I had the proof. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, thinking it was George. But the name on the screen was my lawyer's. Why was he calling me at this hour? I answered, my voice still shaky. "Erna," he said, and the urgency in his tone made my stomach drop. "Forget the 48-hour deadline. I just got an emergency notice from the city's Department of Buildings. Someone just submitted an anonymous tip about potential structural instability at your address. They're sending a team of inspectors at 9 a.m. to do a full foundation review." Finch was already moving. He was going to burn the building down himself. The lawyer's words echoed in the cold morning air. An anonymous tip. Inspectors at 9 a.m. Finch wasn't just trying to corner me anymore. He was lighting the fuse himself. He was going to gut the building's value, create a panic, and then swoop in to buy the wreckage from me for pennies. He would rather burn his own kingdom down than let me rule it. I stood on the empty sidewalk, the leather folder in my hand feeling less like a prize and more like a ticking bomb. For a terrifying moment, I thought about calling him, surrendering, and just ending the nightmare. He had won. I stumbled into a 24-hour diner, the smell of coffee and grease doing little to calm my racing heart. I ordered a coffee I knew I couldn't drink and laid the folder and my grandfather's journal on the table. My options were clear and terrible. Option 1. Do nothing. The inspectors would find the faulty foundation, the building would be condemned, and I would be left with nothing. Option 2. Use the folder to expose Finch. The building would still be condemned, but he would go down with it. It was a choice between losing everything, or losing everything and taking him with me. Both felt like defeat. My eyes fell on my grandfather's journal. I read his words again, desperation making my vision blurry. A truth can be a weapon or a shield, depending on how you hold it. I had been thinking of the truth as a weapon, a way to hurt Finch. But what if that wasn't the point? A shield doesn't attack. It protects. But how could this terrible truth protect anything? It felt like pure poison. What was I missing? What had my grandfather, the quiet, clever builder, truly intended for me to do with this dangerous secret? I looked up from the journal, and my eyes landed on the small television mounted in the corner of the diner. A woman with sharp, intelligent eyes was talking. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Penelope Reed investigates. How City Hall ignored warnings on downtown tunnel project." Penelope Reed. She was a famous investigative reporter in the city, a giant killer known for taking on corrupt politicians and powerful corporations. She didn't just report the news, she shaped it. An idea, wild and reckless, sparked in my mind. My lawyer was playing by Finch's rules. What if I stopped playing his game entirely? My hands shook as I found her contact information on the news station's website. It was almost 4 a.m., but I didn't care. I left a message, my voice tight with urgency. "My name is Erna Wells. I have proof that Alastair Finch and Sterling Corporation have been hiding a structural defect in the Sterling Tower for 50 years. A defect his family created. The city is sending inspectors at 9 a.m. He's trying to bury the story by destroying the building's reputation, and mine along with it. Please. You're my only hope. I hung up, feeling like I had just thrown a rock at a sleeping giant. To my astonishment, my phone rang less than 10 minutes later. It was her. Mr. Finch is a very powerful man, Mrs. Wells, Penelope Reed said, her voice awake and alert. You'd better not be wasting my time. We met 30 minutes later in the empty diner. I showed her everything. My termination letter, my grandfather's journal, and the original partnership agreement from the wall. I told her the whole story. She listened without saying a word, her sharp eyes scanning every page, every word, judging if I was telling the truth. When I finished, she was silent for a full minute. He's counting on you being scared, she finally said. He thinks you'll see this as a problem you have to solve alone. He's making the truth the enemy. We just have to make the truth bigger than him. She leaned forward, a fierce light in her eyes. He wants to control the story by making it about a faulty building. We'll change the story. We'll make it about a fraudulent CEO who knowingly endangered the public for profit. Are you ready for that? Because once we start this fire, there is no putting it out. I thought of his smirk as he called me incompetent. I thought of the 20 years of my life I had given him. I thought of my husband. This was never just about a building. Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady. I'm ready. For the next few hours, Penelope and her team worked like a well-oiled machine. They verified the documents, cross-referenced old building permits, and prepared a media firestorm. The plan was to release the story online and on the air at exactly 8:55 a.m., just as the city inspectors were scheduled to arrive. At 8:50 a.m., I stood across the street from the building with George by my side. My heart was pounding, but for the first time, it wasn't just with fear. It was with hope. Right on schedule, a van with the city's logo pulled up to the curb. Moments later, Mr. Finch's sleek black car arrived. He stepped out, looking powerful and smug, ready to watch his plan unfold. He thought he was about to witness my final defeat. He adjusted his tie and smiled, ready for the show to begin. But then, a different show started. Every phone on the street began to buzz at once. A news alert. Mr. Finch pulled out his own phone to see what was happening. At that exact moment, the giant news screen in the plaza next to the building flickered to life. Penelope Reed's face appeared, serious and commanding. And beneath her, a headline in huge, bold letters. The Sterling Scandal. Finch legacy built on a dangerous lie. Thousands endangered. Mr. Finch looked from his phone to the giant screen, and every drop of color drained from his face. The battle was no longer hidden in the walls of his office. It was now on every screen in the city. The world seemed to stop. Mr. Finch stood frozen on the sidewalk, his face pale, his eyes locked on the giant television screen that was broadcasting his family's darkest secret to the entire city. The smug confidence he wore like a suit of armor had evaporated, leaving him looking small and exposed. Reporters, smelling blood in the water, swarmed towards him, shouting questions and shoving microphones in his face. For the first time, Alastair Finch had lost control of the story. I stood across the street, and for a moment, our eyes met. He saw me. And in his gaze, I didn't see anger anymore. I saw pure, unadulterated fear. His paralysis lasted only a moment. His survival instincts kicked in, and he transformed back into a cornered animal. No comment. Get away from me, he snarled, shoving his way through the crowd of reporters. He practically dove into the back of his car, shouting at his driver to go. As the black car sped away, leaving chaos in its wake, I knew this was far from over. I hadn't just won a battle. I had started a war. He wasn't just going to run. He was going to regroup, rearm, and come back at me with everything he had. Penelope Reed came to stand beside me, her expression calm and focused amidst the flashing cameras. That's phase 1, she said, watching Finch's car disappear. Now comes phase 2, the storm. His lawyers are going to try to bury us. They will attack your character, call you a liar, a thief, anything to shift the blame. They will try to make you the villain of this story. Our job is to make sure that doesn't happen." The open question hung in the air. How could I, a woman with nothing, stand against the storm a billionaire could create? My phone, which had been silent for days except for calls from my lawyer, began to buzz uncontrollably. But it wasn't lawyers. It was text messages. One after another, from numbers I recognized from my 20 years at Sterling Corporation. "Erna, we're with you." He did the same thing to my department. "If you need a witness, I'll talk." These were the voices of people who had been too afraid to speak up for years. I had thought I was fighting alone, but I had just given an army the courage to show itself. I wasn't just Erna Wells anymore. I was their hope. The city inspectors, now at the center of a major media event, knew they couldn't just do a routine check. The lead inspector approached Penelope and announced that they were launching a full, formal investigation into Sterling Corporation, effective immediately. The narrative had shifted completely. It was no longer about whether my building was safe. It was about whether Alistair Finch was a criminal. The shield my grandfather had written about was working. The truth wasn't destroying the building. It was protecting it by exposing the man who had poisoned its roots. The counterattack came sooner than I expected. By lunchtime, a statement from a high-powered law firm was released to the press. It was brutal. Ms. Erna Wells is a disgruntled former employee who was terminated due to gross incompetence, it read. These wild, baseless accusations are a clear attempt to extort money from Mr. Finch. The documents she is using were stolen from company property. We will be pursuing all legal options to hold Ms. Wells accountable for her malicious actions. The words incompetent, thief, and liar were designed to hurt me, to make me doubt myself all over again. I sat with George in the diner, the lawyer's statement glowing on my phone screen. The old fear began to creep back into my heart. "Maybe this was a mistake, George," I whispered. "How can I fight this?" He put his sturdy hand over mine. "Elias knew this would happen," he said, his voice a calm anchor in my storm. "He knew they would attack the person to protect the lie. He didn't leave you that journal so you could fight like them. He left it so you would fight like him. With the truth." Just as he said that, an email popped up on my phone. The sender was anonymous. The subject line just said, Sterling Tower Foundation. My breath caught in my throat. The email was short. I was a city inspector in the 1970s. Finch's father had me fired when I refused to sign off on the foundation inspection. He buried my report, but I kept my own copy. "I can prove everything. But I am an old man, and they are dangerous. We need to meet. Come alone." Was this real? Or was this a trap set by Finch? The email gave a time and a place. 4 p.m. at the city's main public library, in the historical archives section. It was a perfect place for a secret meeting. Public, but quiet, with countless places to hide. I knew it was a risk. Finch could be waiting for me. But what choice did I have? This was a piece of the puzzle I couldn't ignore. I told George the plan, just so someone knew, and at 3:50 p.m., I walked into the vast, silent library, my heart pounding with every step. I found the archives, a maze of towering shelves filled with old books and records. I walked to the location mentioned in the email and waited, trying to look calm. The minutes ticked by. I was about to give up and leave, thinking I'd been a fool, when I heard a soft footstep behind me. I turned around, expecting to see an old, nervous man. But it wasn't a man at all. Standing there, holding a worn-out file folder and looking just as terrified as I was Brielle, the young woman who had taken my job. My mind struggled to make sense of the scene. Brielle. The sharp, fast young woman who Mr. Finch had hired to take my place was standing in front of me, looking scared and holding a file that could change everything. My first thought was that it was a trap. A cruel, elaborate trick designed by Finch to fool me, to get me to lower my guard before he delivered the final blow. I took a step back, my hand instinctively tightening on the strap of my bag. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold and suspicious. Did he send you? Brielle flinched at my tone. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Mr. Finch doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm homesick. She took a hesitant step forward and held out the file. This is from my grandfather. The anonymous email. That was me sending it for him. He's the inspector who was fired. He's been terrified of the Finch family for 50 years. But when he saw you on the news, he said your grandfather's courage gave him his own back. He's too old and too sick to come himself, so he sent me. I stared at her, then down at the worn-out folder she was holding. Could this be real? I cautiously took it from her. Inside, the documents were yellowed with age, but the official city seal was still visible. It was a geological survey and a foundation inspection report, dated 1975. It detailed in cold technical language the dangerously poor quality of the concrete and warned of significant structural risk over time. It was signed by her grandfather, and across the top, stamped in faded red ink, were the words, "Report rejected, overruled." It was the smoking gun. Why are you doing this? I asked, my suspicions softening into confusion. He gave you my job. You have everything to lose by helping me. Brielle looked down at the floor, a flicker of shame in her eyes. When Mr. Finch hired me, she said quietly, I thought it was the opportunity of a lifetime. But then I saw how he operates. The lies, the cruelty. It wasn't just you, Erna. He treats everyone like they're disposable. She looked up, her voice gaining strength. This morning after the story broke, he told me to shred all the maintenance logs for the last 10 years. He wanted me to help him cover his tracks. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. She wasn't just helping her grandfather find redemption. She was saving herself. She saw what her future would be at that company, to either be a victim or a criminal. In that moment, looking at this young woman who I had seen as my enemy, I saw an ally. We were two different generations of women who the same powerful man had tried to use and discard. We were on the same side. He wanted me to be part of the lie, she said. I decided I'd rather be part of the truth. Just as we began to form a plan to get the new evidence to Penelope, Brielle's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, and her face went white. It was a text message from Mr. Finch. It simply said, "Feeling better? Hope you are. We have a lot to discuss when you're back." It wasn't a question. It was a threat. He was letting her know that he knew she wasn't sick. He was watching her. A cold dread washed over me. We weren't operating in the shadows anymore. The predator knew exactly where we were. We have to go. Now, I said, a new urgency in my voice. The library no longer felt like a safe haven. It felt like a fishbowl. Every person who glanced our way seemed like one of Finch's spies. We walked quickly, not daring to run, out of the library and onto the busy street, constantly looking over our shoulders. Were we being followed? Was that black car idling at the corner one of his? The short journey to the news station felt like crossing a minefield, the folder with the final piece of proof feeling like a target on our backs. We burst into Penelope Reed's office, out of breath and rattled. I placed the old rejected inspection report on her desk next to my grandfather's journal. Penelope looked from one document to the other, her eyes lighting up with the fire of a hunter who has finally cornered her prey. "This is it," she breathed. "This isn't just a family secret anymore. This is a provable, 50-year criminal cover-up with an official city document to back it up. The district attorney can't ignore this. We've got him, Erna. We've finally got him." We all allowed ourselves a moment of relief, a shared breath of victory. It felt like the end. But just as a smile touched my face, Penelope's private phone line rang. She answered it, her expression shifting from triumph to shock. "What?" she said, her voice low. "Are you sure? When?" She hung up the phone and looked at us, her face grim. That was my source inside Finch's executive office. "He's not just shredding documents. He's running." My heart stopped. What do you mean, running? I asked. Penelope looked at me, the hard truth clear in her eyes. He just booked a private jet. It's scheduled to take off in 3 hours from a private airfield. The destination is a small island in the South Pacific that has no extradition treaty with the United States. He wasn't going to fight. He was going to abandon his company, his employees, and his entire legacy, and disappear forever, taking his money with him. We had him trapped, but in 3 hours, the cage would be empty. 3 hours. 180 minutes until Alastair Finch vanished into the sky, leaving a trail of destruction behind him. The victory we felt just moments before dissolved into sheer panic. Penelope's office, which had been a war room for our fight, suddenly felt like a cage. We had the truth, we had the proof. But what good was it if the criminal was about to escape forever? Finch wasn't just running from the law, he was running from the consequences of his entire life, and the clock was ticking. Penelope, ever the professional, sprang into action. Her face was a mask of grim determination. "The DA's office is our only shot," she said, already dialing a number on her private line. "They're the only ones who can get a judge to issue a warrant and ground that plane. But they won't move without seeing this evidence themselves, and we can't just walk in." She was trying to reach the district attorney directly, a feat that was nearly impossible on a normal day, let alone in the middle of a breaking scandal like this. While Penelope fought on the phone, I looked at Brielle. She was pale, her hands trembling slightly. She had risked everything to bring us that folder, and now it seemed like it might be for nothing. I put my hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens," I said softly, "you did the right thing. Your grandfather would be so proud." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. "My grandfather lived in fear for 50 years, she replied. "I'm not going to. We have to stop him." In that moment, we weren't just allies. We were friends. "It's a dead end," Penelope said, slamming the phone down in frustration. "The DA is in a closed-door budget meeting and can't be reached. Her chief deputy is too scared to make a move against Finch without her direct approval. They're telling me to submit a formal request, which could take days. They're stalling." It was the oldest trick in the book. Finch's power and influence were still protecting him, building a wall of bureaucracy that we could never break through in time. It was a checkmate. My mind raced, images flashing before my eyes. Finch's smug face. The eviction notice. The word, incompetent. The messages of support from my old co-workers. An idea, born from desperation and fueled by anger, took hold. "Then we go over their heads," I said, my voice surprising me with its own strength. "We can't convince one person in an office. So let's convince everyone. Let's convince the entire city. Go live, Penelope. Right now. Tell the whole world what you just told us." Penelope stared at me, her journalist's mind instantly seeing the risk and the genius of the move. It was reckless. It could be seen as trying to incite a mob. But it was our only card left to play. "Do it," Brielle urged. "Put the evidence on the screen. Let everyone see the proof." Penelope nodded, her decision made. Within minutes, she was in the studio, the cameras were on, and her serious face was once again being broadcast on every screen. "We have a breaking update on the Sterling scandal," she began. "Alastair Finch is not just a fraud. He is now a fugitive." The broadcast was a firestorm. Penelope laid out everything. The suppressed inspector's report, Brielle's grandfather's story, and the news of the private jet scheduled to leave in a little over 2 hours. She ended by looking directly into the camera and saying, "The district attorney's office has so far been unreachable. We ask them and every official in this city, are you going to let him get away?" The public reaction was like a tidal wave. Social media exploded. The phone lines at the DA's office and City Hall were completely flooded. We hadn't just reported the news. We had deputized the entire city. In his penthouse apartment high above the city, Alastair Finch watched it all. He saw his face next to the word, fugitive. He saw the picture of the inspector's report. He saw his escape plan being broadcast for the world to see. A cold fury burned in his eyes. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out of the door, barking into his phone at his pilot. "Get the plane ready now. We leave immediately. I don't care about the flight plan, just get me in the air." He was accelerating his timeline, trying to outrun the firestorm we had created. Back in the newsroom, Penelope's phone rang again. She answered it, and her eyes widened. "It's the DA herself," she mouthed to us. The public pressure had worked. The wall of bureaucracy had crumbled. "I've seen your report, Ms. Reed," the district attorney's voice said, sharp and angry. "My staff will be dealt with. I'm on my way to an emergency session with a judge right now to get that warrant. I need the location of that airfield, and I need it yesterday." There was a chance. A real chance. Penelope's source came through with the location. A small, private airfield just outside the city limits. She relayed the information to the DA's team, who were already racing to get the warrant signed. Victory was so close I could taste it. But then, Penelope's source called one last time, his voice filled with panic. "He knows you're coming. He's changed the plan," he shouted over the phone. "He's not waiting. They're moving. The plane is taking off right now." Through the phone, faint but unmistakable, we could hear the deafening roar of a jet engine powering up for takeoff. The roar of the jet engine was the sound of our defeat. Through the speaker of Penelope's phone, we heard the plane taxiing, gaining speed, and then the final heartbreaking sound of it lifting off the ground and climbing into the sky. He was gone. Alastair Finch had slipped through our fingers. We had the warrant, we had the police on the way, but we were minutes too late. In the newsroom, a heavy silence fell. We had thrown everything we had at him, and still he had won. All I could think was that he was up there, looking down on the city, laughing at us all. And I was right. On his private jet, Alastair Finch was indeed laughing. He poured himself a glass of expensive champagne and watched the lights of the city shrink below him. He had done it. He had escaped. Let the company fall apart. Let the building get condemned. Let them all scream his name. What did it matter? He had hundreds of millions of dollars tucked away in a secret, untraceable offshore account. He would live like a king on a sunny island while Erna Wells was left with his mess. He toasted the empty seat across from him. "To the incompetent," he sneered and took a long drink. But then, his satellite phone rang. It was his private banker, the only person in the world who knew how to access his secret fortune. "Mr. Finch." The banker's voice was frantic, panicked. "The money. It's gone." Finch almost dropped his glass. "What do you mean gone?" he yelled. "It's a transfer, sir," the banker stammered. "A withdrawal was triggered this morning. It seems there was a clause in the account's master agreement. A fail-safe. If the account was ever linked to criminal activity by a court order, all funds were to be immediately and anonymously donated to a list of city charities. The transfer is complete. There is nothing left." Finch's world tilted on its axis. A fail-safe. He remembered a quiet old handyman, a man he and his father had always underestimated. Elias Wells. This was his grandfather's final move. It wasn't just the documents in the wall. The true trap was the money. He had left Finch a poisoned treasure, knowing that one day Finch's own greed and criminality would be the key that sprung the trap. Finch wasn't a king escaping to his island. He was a broke man in a borrowed plane, flying to nowhere. "Turn around," he screamed at the pilot, his face a mask of pure fury. "Turn this plane around right now." He flew right back into the lion's den. By the time his jet landed back at the private airfield, the police were waiting. The flashing red and blue lights painted the side of his plane. He walked down the steps, not as a powerful CEO, but as a man who had lost everything. And I was there, standing with George and Brielle, watching from a safe distance. He saw me. His face, once so full of arrogance, was now hollow and empty. He had nothing left to fight with. I didn't smile. I just watched as they put him in handcuffs, his final act of power a desperate, failed attempt to get his money back. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. With Finch gone and the truth revealed, the city didn't condemn the building. Instead, they worked with me. We used the recovered partnership documents to secure a loan to begin repairing the foundation, making it stronger and safer than ever before. Finch's stolen money, now in the hands of charities, helped fund part of the project. My grandfather's final gift wasn't just my salvation, it was a gift to the entire city. My old co-workers who had been fired unfairly were offered their jobs back. Brielle became my new building manager, her sharp mind now used for good. One quiet afternoon, I visited my grandfather's grave. The headstone was simple, just his name and the years he had lived. Elias Wells. A good man. I placed a small bouquet of flowers on the grass. "You were more than a good man, Grandpa," I whispered. "You were a genius. You knew him so well. You knew he would run, and you knew his money was his only real power. Thank you." I finally understood. He hadn't just left me a building. He had left me a purpose. He had left me a chance to finish the job he started. A few months later, the old, tarnished sign on the front of the building came down. The workers put up a new one, with simple, elegant letters that shone in the sun. It no longer said, Sterling Tower. It now said, The Wells Tower. It was a promise. A promise that this place would now be run with the honesty and integrity of the man who had laid its first bricks. It was a home for businesses, a place of work for hundreds of people, and a legacy I was proud to carry. I still have the eviction notice Mr. Finch was served that first day. I keep it in my desk drawer. Sometimes, when I feel overwhelmed, I take it out and look at it. It reminds me of the day my world ended, and the day it truly began. It reminds me that sometimes, the people who seem the most powerful are standing on the weakest foundations. And the people they call incompetent are the ones with the strength to build something that lasts forever. I look at the paper, and then I tear it in half. My revenge is complete, not because he is in jail, but because I am free. What an incredible journey for Erna. A story of how the world can turn upside down in a single day, and how true strength comes not from power or money, but from courage and truth. If Erna's story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next empowering story. Thank you for watching.